Hello and welcome to this stores management and store control training workshop with me, Tendayi, from Foundation for Business Technology. I am an applied physics major who turned into a business and IT consultant. I've worked in the IT industry since 1990 and first worked with stock management systems in 1992 as a support consultant for a production management system which had an integrated stock control module. I've been conducting this particular training since 2003 in Namibia, and I've also conducted it twice in Lusaka, Zambia. I started developing my own stock management software in 2003. It is currently being used as part of a production management system which I also developed at a garment manufacturer in Windhoek, also as part of point of sale for some retailers. The objectives of this training are basically to give an overview of management information systems. So we are going to discuss in general what are management information systems and how stock management fits into such systems. We are going to look at how stock management fits into the overall organization's management structure. We will also explore the business and operational objectives of stock management. Further, we will discuss the key performance indicators in stock management. We'll also look at how stock contributes to the cost of production or service provision. In those kind of services where we need to use materials, say for example in a workshop where we are servicing vehicles or repairing equipment, there are spare parts and materials that are required. So we will look at how do those materials contribute to the cost of the overall service being provided. We will also look at the classification of stock items using product groups, value classes, ABC classification, and so forth. Further, we will be defining the different types of traceability for different stock items. We'll also be looking at monitoring and controlling of stock movements and how to use stock accounts to define logical stock disposition. One of the most important topics will be how to maintain optimum stock levels using methods like maximum quantity, maximum order quantity, economic order quantity, etc. We'll then look at stock replenishment methods. In other words, how do we replenish stock? How do we decide when to buy more stock? So we'll look at different methods like maximum minimum method or reorder level, as well as MRP or materials requirements planning. We'll also look at product costing and bill of materials or bill of quantities. One of the most important aspects is stock take or stock check. So we are going to be looking at the stock take cycle as well as the policies and procedures involved. We'll also look at best practices and procedures for handling of stock. In this particular module, I'm going to be looking and discussing some of my experiences in various stores settings, and I'll be talking about some observations that I've made, things that people do thinking they are right, but which are completely wrong. So we are going to be looking at some of those issues. Then finally, we are going to be looking at management reports, and these are actually the most important aspect of any system because the reason why we create systems is so that we can provide reports to enable managers to make decisions. Let's now look at the format of this training course. The training consists of short video lectures that are available online 24/7. This means that you can participate when it is most convenient to you. So we don't have any set times when we say it's now lecture time. So any time is lecture time. You can also rewind and replay any parts of the videos. So in other words, if you don't understand something, just stop the video, rewind it, and replay it as many times as are necessary. We'll be using practical examples and case studies. So this is not going to be a purely theoretical training. We are going to be using real life examples. Participants will be required to complete some practical exercises. You'll find items on your menu that say practical submission 1, practical submission 2, and so forth. So what you need to do basically is to click on that link so that you can upload your exercises. If you cannot upload, you can simply email the exercises to me directly. Each participant will be provided with a trial copy of our stock management software to use during the practical exercises. The trial software will help you to instantly see reports and statistics that would otherwise take you hours to generate. So this trial software that we give you is basically an additional tool that can help you to quickly assimilate the concepts that we are going to be training you. But otherwise, even without the trial software itself, you are able to do all the exercises either manually or on Excel. Feel free to send us your comments, whether you've got questions or recommendations at any time during or after the training. So you can always email to me whatever is on your mind. We are now going to be looking at an overview of information management systems. First, we define what is a system. The reason we need to make this definition is because many times when you ask somebody, do you have a stock management system? The first thing that comes to their mind is whether they've got software for stock management. But from the word go, I would like to make it very clear that the software is not the system. The software is simply a tool that makes the system easier to implement. So when we talk of a system, we are referring to a configuration of people, resources, policies, and procedures that are designed for the collection, processing, communication, and storage of data or information required for management purposes. We use the word configuration because this is a well thought out arrangement of people. It's not just a random grouping of people. It's well thought out. It's resources that are planned and strategized for. It is policies and procedures that are systematically put in place in order to meet a specific requirement. So the definition might look daunting or difficult, but if you look at it from the two key aspects of the definition, you discover it is very easy. The first aspect is what makes up a system. It is people, resources, policies, and procedures. So once you know what makes up a system, then the next thing is to know what is the purpose of the system. It is the collection, processing, communication, and storage of data or information. So you can see that the purpose of the system is to do with information. It is to do with collection, processing, and communication and storage of data or information. As we look at what makes up a system, first we consider the people that make up the system. They are the first and most important aspect of a system. So the moment you have people in the organization or in the department, you already have the beginnings of a system. A configuration of people implies a well thought out organizational structure that places the right people in the right positions to achieve maximum results with minimum effort. So most of your time in setting up a system should be devoted to ensuring that you have got the right people in the right places within the organization or within the department, if that is what you are managing. Once we have people, those people require resources, because no organization can function without resources, such as financial resources, equipment, buildings, vehicles, and so forth. The right type, quantities, and combination of resources must be acquired for a system to function properly. Then we also need policies. So policies refer to rules, you can call them laws, regulations, they can be acts of parliament or guidelines that govern the organization, and they also provide boundaries and limits to personal discretion. Let's take a stock management environment, for example. You can be given a rule that says only stores personnel are allowed beyond this point. That is a policy statement. We can also say you cannot buy stock if it exceeds $5,000 without authorization from your manager. That is a policy statement. So anything that governs your personal decisions is a policy statement. Then lastly, the system requires procedures, whereas policies are general guidelines. Procedures refer to step-by-step instructions on how to perform a particular task. So when we talk of procedures, we are looking at a specific task that has to be performed. Like, for example, how do we purchase new stock? We might put in a procedure that says, first, you need a purchase requisition. Then you need to get 3 or 4 quotations. That requisition needs to be approved by your supervisor and further by the manager, and then taken to the procurement department. Then we give every step until the items have been purchased and they've arrived and they've been paid for. So that is a procedure to accomplish a specific task. I mentioned earlier on that people are the most important aspect of any system. So how do we come up with the most ideal organizational structure? In strategic management, there is a concept that says structure follows strategy. In other words, you don't start by grouping people together, then you decide what are those people going to be doing, or what is the organization going to be doing? But you start by deciding what the organization is all about. Then the strategy of the organization is the one that will now determine the type of people and the number of people that you need in the various positions. So firstly, you need to know what are the objectives of the organization. What is it that we wish to accomplish with this organization? You also need to know the scale or the size of the operation. Is it just a small to medium enterprise? Is this a huge enterprise? Is it an international organization? Then also we need to look at the scope of the operation. So whereas the scale refers to the size, the scope refers to how many different activities the organization is involved in. So you can have an organization that is very huge with 1,000 employees, but its scope is limited to one activity. Probably that organization is only making toothpicks. But you can also have an organization that is small with only 20 employees. So the scale is small, but it has got a wide scope because they are not only making toothpicks, they also make teaspoons, they also make cups, they also make stoves, they also make electrical gadgets. So the scope refers to how many different activities your organization is involved in. When it comes to stock management, there are different configurations that will require different types of people and resources. So if you talk to 4 different people, they will tell you, I control stock in my organization. But what they mean by controlling stock in their organization might actually vary a lot when you start asking the different people to give you their meaning of controlling stock in terms of the scale and the scope. The first person might be in a very simple office setup where he is only responsible for buying office supplies. So all he does is buy toner cartridges for the printers, he buys paper, he buys ink, and so forth. So that is a simple office setup. The next person might be dealing with that office setup, but in addition, they also have a workshop which has got a stores where they keep spare parts. So that second configuration, it is more complex because it has got a wider scope. It is no longer just office supplies, but it is now office supplies plus a technical workshop with a stores for the spare parts. You can also have an organization which has got a manufacturing facilities that requires the storage of raw materials, sub-assemblies, and finished goods. So your store is no longer just keeping the components that you buy from suppliers. The store is also now keeping sub-assemblies, which are half finished goods which are being made in-house in the factory, and also a finished goods store or warehouse where we keep what we have finished producing or manufacturing ready for sale or dispatch to the clients that ordered them. You can also have another setup where we have a distribution company which has got multiple facilities in various locations. Their job is to buy from manufacturers and to distribute to retailers. So those are different setups with different scales and different scopes of operation. So when you ask somebody, are you doing stock management? You should not stop there. You should ask the scale and the scope of stock management in their organization. We are now going to be looking at the second aspect of our definition of a system. The first we said is what makes up the system, which is people, resources, policies, and procedures. Now we are looking at the second aspect, which is what is the purpose of a system. The first purpose of a system is the collection of data. This is the most important task of any system, because for us to have reports at different levels of the organization, that information must come from somewhere. It is at the very bottom level, the operational level, that is where we collect this information. So that part of the system is very critical. The quality of the data that is collected determines also the quality of the outputs or the reports that are produced by the system. I'm sure you have heard of garbage in and garbage out. Once we have collected that information, next we need to process the information. The reason it needs to be processed is because in its raw form, data is not useful to management for decision making. It has to be converted or processed into useful summaries that can categorize the information in dimension relevant for different scenario. So processing is like cooking food. You might have all the ingredients, the carrot, the tomato, the green pepper, the curry powder, but in its form, if you take those things to the dining table, they are useless to the people that are hungry. They need to be processed so that they produce the final output, which is the food which is relevant to the hungry person. So when you take data, you could take a pile of receipts that you have been collecting throughout the month, and you go and put it on the desk of the manager and say, this is the information for this month. The manager will simply tell you to take out your garbage, because those receipts, they do not mean anything to the manager. What he wants is for you to sit down, summarize that information, put it in various categories, and then produce a single page report that says this is the summary of stock movement during this month. Thirdly, there is need to communicate that information that we are processing, because the people that are collecting and processing the data are not the consumers. Just like the chef in the hotel who is making the food, processing the food, he is not the consumer of the food. So there has to be a way of communicating what is being processed from the person who is making it to the people that are consuming it. So there is need to define proper communication channels and communication media. So when we talk of communication channels, these are basically the logical path through which the information flows. So it's not a physical path, it's a logical path that says from the clerk, this document must go to the supervisor who signs it, then it goes to the manager, then it goes to the CEO. So that is a logical path. Even if the clerk is sitting in the same office with the CEO, he cannot pass the document straight to the CEO in spite of their close proximity physically, because logically, according to the communication path, those two people are very far. They are separated by two other people in the middle. So even if the document has to come from the clerk in one building to the supervisor in a different building, then come back to the manager in the same office with the clerk, that is the communication channel that must be followed. Then we talk of communication media, which are the actual physical means by which we carry the data. So the system must decide, how do we communicate purchasing data, for example? Do we simply pick up the phone and tell the supplier, please send a truckload of bricks? That is not a proper way to communicate purchasing data. We need to come up with a document that can be traced. So that is why we design a purchase order. So the purchase order is a communication media. It is used for communicating purchase data to the supplier. In the same way, after the supplier has supplied us with the materials, they want to communicate to us that we owe them money. So they send us a document called an invoice. That is also a communication media used for communicating a demand for payment. Then finally, there is need to store the information during the time we are processing it, as well as after we're finished processing that information. So the storage that we use must be easily accessible to people that need the data. In a manual system, this could be a number or a series of filing cabinets, but in a computerized system, we are talking about various servers where the information must be stored. Then we decide who has got passwords to access certain information. So far, we have discussed what a system is. Now, let us discuss why organizations need to formalize their information systems. The first reason is because there is an ever-increasing volume or amount of information that needs to be managed. Every time when we buy, when we sell, we are accumulating invoices, receipts, purchase orders, and a lot of information that is to do with our activities. So as that information increases, it becomes difficult to be able to manage that data manually. So we need to come up with a system that enables us to simply capture the transaction as it happens, and then that one piece of information is automatically integrated with all the other information that we had already. Then secondly, the reason why we need an information system is the need for division of labor to give data responsibility and accountability. Remember, we talked about the configuration of people in a system. The reason why we give job descriptions is because of the need for that division of labor, so that people can have responsibilities and accountabilities. When we talk of responsibilities, we are referring to specific things that need to be done, specific tasks. If you take a cleaner, for example, their responsibility is to clean the offices. However, their supervisor has got the accountability for the cleanliness of the environment. So if we discover that the offices are not being cleaned properly, we do not go to the person with the responsibility, we go to the person with the accountability, the supervisor, and we ask the supervisor, why are the offices not being cleaned? This is the reason why when a football team fails, we do not fire the striker or the defender, we fire the coach, because we have given the coach the full accountability and resources required for the entire system. He is the one that decides on the people, the resources. He is the one that decides on the configuration, who is playing on what position, and so forth. He decides on the policies, what are the rules for camp, what are the rules on the field. He decides on the procedures, which tactics are we using today. So if his system fails, we do not blame the players, who are simply being given responsibilities within the bigger system. We blame the person who came up with the whole configuration. Then lastly, we also need a system because of the need for consistency and continuity. The quality of management information system must not depend on the variable competencies or incompetencies of individual staff members. So in other words, the quality of our service must not depend on individuals within the organization. Our system must dictate how things are done, so that no matter who is occupying that office, the same procedures are being used. That is what we call consistency. Then continuity means we are doing our succession planning. We know if the accountant is not there, there is somebody to fill in his shoes immediately. We cannot say our office is closed today because the cashier did not come to work. You don't have a continuity plan if it is like that. Next, let us look at the information management process. While information needs might vary from one organization to another, the actual process of managing information is the same, and it involves firstly a needs analysis. It means you must first determine what is our current and our future information requirements. Then secondly, we identify what are our data sources. Where does information come from within the organization? Which points in our system collect transaction data? Then from there, we can then come up with procedures for collecting that information, because we know who is collecting the data and where it is being collected. We must also decide on where are we keeping or storing this data and information. Who does the processing of the information? Because it is not the person that collects the data that necessarily processes it. We need people that are capable of transforming raw data into the reports that are required for operational managers as well as strategic managers. We must also define what we call data flow definitions, which ensure that information is being communicated to the people that need it. We talked earlier on about communication channels and communication media. And lastly, we have to look at data security. In other words, securing information from those that are not entitled to see it or to use it. Next, let us look at this information pyramid. We can see that from the operational level at the bottom, as we go up the organizational structure through the tactical level to the strategic managers, the amount of information that is being handled becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. This is because at the bottom, this is where we are handling the data that is routine and mostly repetitive for day-to-day transactions and operations. So at the operational level, that's where we are doing the buying and the selling. So we have got bigger piles of documentation. However, as we communicate that information through this boundary, which represents processing, that information is now transformed or processed into summaries that are more analytical. And these summaries are used for short-term to medium-term decision making by the tactical managers. So when we talk of short-term and medium-term, we are looking at either weekly or monthly production reports or sales reports, sales forecasts, and so forth. However, as we summarize the information or process it further for strategic managers, your board of directors, your top management, they are only looking at summaries that are good for long-term decision making. They are looking at reports that simply tell them what the performance of the organization was over the past year, over the past 5 or 10 years. Now, some examples of information systems. Depending on the organization you work for, you might find there are manufacturing information systems which are used in manufacturing environments. You also have accounting and financial information systems. We have marketing information systems, inventory management information systems, document management systems, human resource management information systems, fleet management systems, debt management systems, point of sale systems, medical systems. So the list goes on and on. For every different type of operation, there is a system associated with it. So the systems can work as standalone systems, but they can also be integrated together, because like in a manufacturing environment, for example, we need accounting and financial systems. We also need to market what we are producing. We also need an inventory system to deal with the inventory. We need human resource management. If we have got vehicles, we need fleet management. So you can see one organization can have all these different types of information systems which are linked together. In other words, there are interfaces between the main system in your department and other systems in the other different departments within the organization. This is the end of this introduction video. I hope you have learned a lot about management information systems, because these are concepts that you are going to need in any type of system that you are going to be working with, not only in inventory management systems. In the next module, we are going to be looking at the business and operational objectives of stock management systems. So we'll see you in the next module.